Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is Grady and it is time for me to review this game, Resident Evil 3 Remake, or Resident Evil 3 by its proper title. I don't think, to be fair, the more I think about the names of these games, Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, 2 Remake, 3 Remake, I kind of just keep thinking that they're not really remakes or even reimaginings. These are products that are more or less the appeasement, the self-appeasement of Capcom. And what I mean by that is the following. They are obviously conscious of what the fans want. The multi-cultural, multi-phased, just multi-diverse fan base that is the Resident Evil universe, right? They know what sells and they know what doesn't sell by this point. Whether they're still working from when they worked on the first Resident Evil game to the new crew. I'm starting to feel that these games weren't meant for the fans. And I've got to think about this more because I haven't really thought about this review. I'll be completely honest. I thought about it, I thought about doing it, and I thought about what I should say. But I've got no script here, as you could probably tell. So I do feel at this present moment, at this present time rather, that Capcom knows what's safe, and obviously they've got a hell of a schedule. We've got possibly Resident Evil 8 coming out soon, a possible trailer coming out for Resident Evil 8 very soon, as well as some other goings on that could be Resident Evil 4 Remake. I'm not going to talk about those games specifically today, obviously. This is about Resident Evil 3. It just seems to me that they know what's safe, just to reiterate and to go back so I can remember what I'm about to say. And that's good enough for them. Resident Evil 3 it's quite a disappointing game. I'm going to try my hardest not to reiterate what I've already told a lot of you in the past videos about where I came from, who I am as a Resident Evil person. So I'm going to forego that and we're going to see what happens, if anything, in the comments section. But know this is all my opinion based on my experience with the series. But I'm going to treat this review kind of like a step-by-step. I'm going to go through via memory basically what happens throughout the game, story, gameplay mechanics, everything like that, and give my take on it. But I'm going to give an overall consensus before I actually do that. When I first played Resident Evil 3, I had in my mind at all times that this is my first playthrough and my opinions will change over the course of the next playthrough or so on and so forth. So when I first played this game, I was excited, you know? It was like, wow, this is a great game, you know? I'm having fun playing this game. Story elements come in, more mechanics, gameplay mechanics come in, and then you complete the game, and then you can go and unlock and go through harder difficulties. So far, this sounds like any other Resident Evil game, pretty much, minus the fact that after you complete the game and having unlocked those difficulties, you are given the option of playing through with or without special abilities and infinite ammo, infinite weapons, that kind of thing. And viewing models like they did beforehand and have done in previous Resident Evil games as well. Which is fine. But that is it. That is it. I can tell you honestly that I have spent way more time, and before you say anything, let me just finish, alright? I've spent way more time with Resident Evil 2 Remake, if you like, up until the point where Resident Evil 3 came out. Now, I know the game's only been out for a couple of months, alright? I understand that. What I'm telling you is this. Based on its current form, I feel no further need to play that game anymore. You can complete the game, go through the difficulties again, but one of the things that I found to be a little bit too, and I'm going to have no holds barred here, you know, it's okay, you can do it, everyone can do this, it's fine. which separates the true hardcore, I'm going to fucking get this, to the casual player. And I think there needs to be a separation because you need to feel that kind of achievement. People like to feel achievements. That's why we have achievements and trophies, right? On the PlayStation and the Xbox and so on and so forth. Even Twitch and shit has stuff like that. So why, well, I know why, but this is why Capcom give you the actual option to go through the game on Inferno mode, the hardest mode, with an infinite rocket launcher. Anyone could do that. And you can see that when you look on your PlayStation, for example. I can't really say anything for the Xbox because I don't own an Xbox One console. But when you go onto your PS4 trophies, when you compare Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3 Remake, reimagining, whatever, we're just going to say whatever now, because we're going to go on forever otherwise. You will see that more people have platinumed Resident Evil 3 than Resident Evil 2. Because in Resident Evil 2, the criteria for getting infinite ammo was way harder. So that's what they've done with Resident Evil 3. It's a point system now. So anyone can get them. If they play the game enough, it is yours. Whatever you want, it is yours. So it took me, 3, maybe 4 playthroughs of Resident Evil 3 to get the rocket launcher, get straight onto the harder difficulties, ace it and get the trophy. Because that's what was required, and that's what I did. That's what a lot of people have done. When you look at Resident Evil 2 Remake, you've got to complete the game in, 2.5 hours on the hardest setting, and you can't use infinite ammo. You've got to be good at the game. Now, I'm sorry, if you're not particularly good at the game, that's fine. You've got the story there, and you've got everything else there. If you haven't got the hours, the man hours, or the time because of your personal life to do these specific achievements, that's life, right? That's what it is. It is what it is. That's one of my favourite sayings. It is what it is. But you shouldn't mark down achievement. But that's what's happening these days. It's not just Resident Evil. That's what's happening with a lot of games these days. It's, come on, listen. More people can play this game. Let's just go on. You could do. It's a shame for me, but there we go. That's an overall kind of consensus of where my mind is at this particular time. Now let's get on to the actual review. 8 minutes or so in. So from the get-go, you insert the game. Nemesis is right there in front of you, so it's like, Nemesis is going to be prominent in this game. Look at this bad boy. He's a scary motherfucker. He greets you at the very first point in the game, the start menu. The intro of this game comes nowhere near as close as the original game. This is Chopper Delta, preparing to drop off an area E95070. All that crap. What are they? No. All that shit. They're coming out of the fucking elevators. Where do they come from? Never. It's pointless. Die. That zombie getting up. I love that bit. But it's so like, the score. Shit's hit the fan. Fucking hell. Now, and this, it just gets you amped up to play the game. It's like, oh my god, I'm in the shit now. This is awesome. Got all these people fighting. I mean, sure, at the time it was like revolutionary in a way to kind of see this particular cutscene. But this one is a little bit more subdued, as the times really are in video games. In certain video games, not everything. That's going to be unfair to say, but it just feels a little bit more subdued and reserved. And having watched it the first time, it didn't personally give me a kind of pump, like, I can't wait for this. Then you wake up as Joe in this dream sequence, and this is another bit I'm not particularly fond on. She looks in the mirror, she's having a dream, obviously, as stated, and she starts bleeding, she's getting infected. She wakes up, and then you go back into the bathroom again. You're absolutely fine, and you take control of Joe properly. But during this, you're looking at some notes, as Resident Evil is a very note-heavy, diary-heavy game. That's cool, that's what it's about. But the problem I have with that sequence, that dream sequence, is that her lack of sleep is only, and the consequences of what's happened beforehand, aren't really that prevalent. I find these to be quite cheap. It's no different to me. I mean, in order for anyone who's asking for your money to grip you, a common tactic is to throw you something that's going to keep you in your seat. But then they just basically forget about this whole lack of sleep, what's happened to the past sequence. I'm not asking for anything too elaborate. It's just, I see past it. It's very transparent to me. And it's a very cheap, and if I may say so, quite a lazy way of implementing what would have been Jill, infected by the Nemesis in the original game. Now it's just a couple of dream sequences. So that's basically my problem with this particular sequence. Then Brad calls you up, and the Nemesis makes his appearance. It's a interesting look, and I'm not down with the way that they've done this introduction to Nemesis, as opposed to Jill, Brad, we gotta all that crap, you know. It's good crap. It's good stuff, not crap. It's good. But again, the original introduction to Nemesis was like, oh fuck, you know, and now I've got to fight this guy, you know. It's a great sequence, you know. Brad gets fucked, and then Jill watches on, does fuck all about it, but you know, it is what it is. And then you fight Nemesis. The problem I have, there's a couple of problems to say the least I have with Nemesis in this game. And again, I'm not going to be saying anything too different to what other people have said before. But there's a few problems with this. Nemesis has a habit of grabbing Jill. Look at this guy. He can grab Jill by the neck or by the head, Sagat style, or old school Nemesis style, right? And just simply go crunch, crack, you're dead. He had her in his hand, puts her on the ground when he could have killed her, and then says, you know what, I'm gonna stamp. No, she gets out the way, and then there's a chase sequence. This happens throughout the whole game. Now, I understand that you can't kill your main character, and I understand that you have to make Nemesis look strong. He doesn't look strong in this game. He looks stupid and weak. There's a sequence, a very scripted sequence, and I'm jumping the gun here. This is something that I do, but I'm going to do it. Where you're running away from Nemesis. He's on the cars. He's got his rocket launcher, and he fires a few rockets at you. The last one, it cuts into a cutscene, and he fires another one. It lands right next to Jill, and it conveniently pushes her over the barricade, or wherever the fuck it is, and then she's like, "Argh!" and then gets back up, and she's limping. That's fine, she's limping, she's selling it. But why isn't she blown up? Why isn't she missing a leg? It was a rocket launcher. That just solidifies that the Nemesis got his rocket launcher from fucking Toys R Us, or something. You know, it's ineffective. You're trying to portray this character who everyone knows, who everyone should know in Resident Evil, you know, as Resident Evil fans, and you've made him significantly weaker, especially, and again, not saying anything new here, when compared to Mr. X, or even compared to the original Nemesis. But anyway, you manage to escape from Nemesis, you reunite with Brad, and then Brad gets chomped. This is a bit of a different way of meeting the end for Brad Vickers. However, I'm not opposed to it. I actually think it makes sense, obviously, because he's been bitten, and so he becomes Zombie Brad. A lot of people know Zombie Brad. He's not exactly secret anymore. And then later on, he meets another character from Resident Evil 2, which we'll go into later. But I wasn't too opposed with that. The thing that kind of, I mean, Brad is known as Chicken Heart. He's basically the scaredy cat of the group, if you are going to have a scaredy cat. But he's been in STARS, and he's a member of STARS for a reason. So he's not going to be like, oh, fuck this shit, kind of thing. He's gonna be brave to a certain extent. He's going to do his job. So at first I kind of thought he should be more of a pussy. But the more I thought about it, the more it kind of made sense that, well, obviously he would still be a brave guy. He's in STARS. He's going to have that kind of brave quality. You make your way to the chopper. You meet Dario along the way. Again, the original Dario is better because this one is seen to be a bit more comedic, which is fine. It works for this particular game. I just think it was better in the last one. I just lost my daughter out there. And then you get to come back at a later point of the game, the original game, and you get to see that he's zombie food. Not so much in this game. It's just, keep moving on. Whatever. Chopper blows up, Nemesis stalks you, you get into a car, you crash the car, Nemesis is after you, then Carlos shows up. His introduction is, hey, fuckface, which I wasn't expecting, but at the same time I'm not really opposed to. I thought, okay, I wasn't expecting that. And Nemesis could be conceived as a fuckface, because of the hole there, you can kind of see that. Carlos then introduces you to Mikhail, as well as you have the civilians in the other section of the train, safe and sound for now. This Mikhail is fine. There's nothing really that I personally feel strongly about this particular version of Mikhail. Again, I felt that the other Mikhail, the original Mikhail, was better. Jill, get out of the cable car now! It just seems to grab onto you more, do you know what I mean? Now, I understand that there are two different time points here. We've got a slightly more cartoonish time scale, more action typical time scale and feel to the original Resident Evil games, as opposed to now what they're doing is making it, a bit more serious. I understand that. I really want to stress that. However, with that comes lack of personality, and this is something that's suffered in the Resident Evil 2 remake as well. There's little personality. In fact, throughout the last few or so Resident Evil games, minus Resident Evil 7, there has been distinct lack of personalities in Resident Evil characters. This is where I'm coming from. Look at Leon, Claire, Ada. It's... As main characters, I'd like to be playing as someone who has a bit more personality, basically. I even think Ethan from Resident Evil 7 had slightly more personality than any of these characters do. To an extent. They're slightly more toned down in this version. And for me, because of that, they're slightly less likable. I am playing a video game at the end of the day, I understand that, but I'm still more drawn to the old characters of the original games. So your mission then is to get out of the city. You end up doing a couple of puzzles, nothing too elaborate. The safe puzzle with the code on the wall in the store. That was a nice little way of getting the code. That was a different kind of approach, that's fine. And then at some point you go to the power station and you have to activate these power outlets where you meet the drain demos. They're basically spiders, but they're not spiders. They're not traditional Resident Evil spiders. They're meant to be drain demos, sure. That's what they're telling you they're meant to be, but they feel more like spiders, don't they? The fact that they have their own section is probably a good thing as well. I mean, you go into this power station and you deal with them and then you come back out. If you get scratched, or if you get infected rather, you have to take a herb. I don't know why they took out the blue herbs in this game. There must have been a reason, obviously. I assume there was. But now you have to take a green herb to puke up, and then you feel better when it comes to the drain demos anyway. So yeah, no blue herbs in this game. And then you're off to escape. Now, Nemesis cuts you off, and this is where Nemesis shines the most, because he's still bipedal, and he's still on your ass, and to a certain extent during this particular segment, he's, as they were quoted, untethered. To a certain extent. But before you can even leave the city, or this part of the city, you are diverted to go into the sewers. This is another sewer section. It is a little bit different, of course, from the previous game that they released, Resident Evil 2 Remake. And we're introduced to the new Hunter Gammas, which I actually like. They reminded me of dinosaurs, just walking on them two legs, just coming at you like that massive mouth. I'm not talking about fully fledged dinosaurs. No dinosaur that I know of, and I'm a very avid dinosaur buff, knows any of dinosaurs with an extending mouth that just comes out. It looks a bit like a flower or some shit. Tentacles. I thought they were great. They did shit me up. They can still shit me up on the harder difficulties to a certain extent. When you kill them, I do like animation. I do like smooth animations in my games, especially Resident Evil games. I mean, you look at Resident Evil 2 Remake, the animations in that game, they're, I think from memory, they're next to faultless, really, aren't they? But when you kill one of these hunter-gatherers, because it's very close quarters in those sewers, whenever they fall down dying, they kind of like slide into place, because of the restrictions of the environment, the map, and I don't know, that kind of makes me feel dirty. I think it's the OCD guy in me, I'm very OCD. I used to be way more OCD back in the day, but this isn't my life story. But I'm quite OCD, so when I see stuff like that, I just want to just polish that off a bit, So there's a little bit of polish that needs to be done there, or that could have been done there. And then you are again reunited with Nemesis, who grabs your head, pulls you out from that hole, drops you, and says, I've got a flamethrower, I'm going to try this. And then you begin the chase. So there's another instance of plot armor right there. Again, it's made to move the story along, it's part of the game, but it does nothing for Nemesis. That's the point I'm trying to get across here. He's an idiot. Maybe you could justify it by saying, well, he's still in a sense a prototype, so it's just whatever. You could say that, that's fine, whatever. But then you've got this little cool segment, scripted segment, sure. But I still think it's cool. No matter how many times I've played this particular part in the game, I still feel like that kind of, this is awesome, Which is it's just what I want in my games, in my Resident Evil games, But yeah, you're on the scaffolding, that whole building area. Music's kicking in, it feels great. And then you have a proper boss fight with Nemesis. Now, different opinions on this boss fight. I happen to like it. It's not particularly hard, but when you're playing it for the first time or two, it's like, oh god, here we go again. But I enjoy it because you are fighting Nemesis. He is restricted, he's got his massive flamethrower there, and he is trying to run after you, and he's got all these kind of weird moves where he's kind of firing up at the sky with his flamethrower and it's all coming down on you kind of thing. The charge move he does, it can get quite tense, for me anyway, but I would consider that personally the best boss fight in the game. You deal with Nemesis, and by the way, I haven't even mentioned Carlos. I've mentioned him very briefly, but this particular version of Carlos I think is fine. Again, I do prefer the old Carlos because he's got a bit more personality. Those were the times back then. But this Carlos is still cool. I like him. He's pretty decent, and I don't dislike him at all. So I think he's. I think this is probably one of, in this particular game, a better adaptation, certainly than Mikhail. But then you meet, or you're reintroduced to a certain extent, to Kendo. Very quick. It's again, this I think was quite a cheap tactic. You basically learn nothing. This is just a cutscene that's there. And a lot of people liked Kendo in Resident Evil 2 Remake. I didn't really. I think that was another kind of lazy attempt to feel something with the daughter, everything like that. I've seen it before in The Walking Dead. I've seen it before in horror films. I've seen it before in Sophie's Choice. I've seen it before, not zombies of course, but just like children and death and stuff like that. It's been done before, is what I'm basically saying. But you move on, Nemesis comes back, and then the scripted event begins where you're running away from him and his rocket launcher. Once you've successfully dodged the Nemesis during this particular section, you get to play as Carlos during the RPD. This is a cool segment in the game. I do like this particular segment. Again, to look at the old game, it was Jill that did this, of course. And during the latter parts of that particular section in the old game, in the original game, Nemesis makes his appearance to Jill and chases her throughout the RPD. In this one, you're with your colleague, and your colleague is T. Do you know what? I don't really have any connection with this guy. He's a backup guy, and he basically is there to serve as a backup. There is someone in this game who I think really does steal the show, and I've not mentioned them yet, and I will very soon. But yeah, you're in the RPD. You're doing a couple of the same puzzles, which work the same way, which is pretty cool. And once you've done that, you are reintroduced to Jill, who is now confronted by a new nemesis. Now, when I first saw this, I wasn't sure what to think. After playing it a second time and so on, I disliked the model even more. And I dislike the fact, beside that, the fact that he's no longer bipedal on two walking legs coming after you signified to me that that's the end, man. that's pretty much the end of Nemesis, the Nemesis that we know. And you're introduced to a boss fight, which makes no sense. He's going after you, and then Nemesis, who is designed to come for you and other STARS members, and just to cut out all the bullshit, runs around and around and around and around and around and around. So this boss fight is severely out of character. And what's more, after you defeat that boss, you are reintroduced to Carlos. You go into the hospital to make a vaccine for Jill, who has unlimited amounts of plot armor in this particular game. The hospital section is cool, by the way. It's a very cool segment. You're reintroduced to the hunters, which look great, by the way. I think the hunters in this game are great. They look great. There's a couple of moments in the game where, it's like, what the hell do I do here? There's a segment where there's 2 or 3 hunters in this particular room, and it's like you've got to go in there and trick them to coming out of that room, or you just got to go in there and grab what you want and just hope they don't kill you, whatever your strat is. There's sequences. If I may digress a sec, but not totally because it's within the same subject. There's a few segments in this game, especially in this hospital segment, where you will see zombies standing there, and you can shoot them, and they won't move. So it's another way to feel kind of safe in this game. It happens in other parts of the game as well, but you will see like a few zombies in this particular segment in the hospital. You shoot them and they just stand there, and you can just keep shooting them like that. Doesn't matter. That takes away from the tension that should be there to begin with, like the previous game before it. That's when the Resident Evil 4 callback comes in, and you have to hold the area with Carlos, and you're shooting all the zombies and a couple of hunters, whatever. Yeah, so that happens. Then you take control of Jill, and you start coming towards the end of the game now. And one of the main purposes of this game, one of the main antagonists apart from Nemesis, is Nikolai. Nikolai is a devious, charismatic, bad guy. Sure, he might be generic. It might be a product of the times. Even a callback to the times. But the fact that he's not one note, like a lot of the characters are pretty much, just gives the game a bit of extra life, where you've got a simple kind of enemy, in a sense simple, with Nemesis. You've got a more human side with Nikolai, which I thought is a kind of great thing to have in the original game anyway. It's mainly about Nemesis, but you've also got another problem with Nikolai. It's no different here. But I genuinely believe that this interpretation of Nikolai is the best representation. Obviously, even more so than the original game. I just can't help but, I love to hate this guy. In actual fact, I don't really hate him. I mean, sure, his ideals might be a little bit extreme, to say the least. But as a character, I feel like he brings quite a lot, considering what's in the game anyway, good and bad. So for me, Nikolai is the star of the show. I wouldn't mind seeing Nikolai again, as long as it made absolute sense. Maybe that's asking a bit too much. But anyway, you're there, you're doing the warehouse area. Some parts of that are a little bit messed up and fucked, if I'm being completely honest. There's a part where you go down a ladder and you've got a containment on your right or on your left as soon as you get down from the ladder, facing the ladder. You move towards a certain area and then something blows up. The camera switches to what's just blown up. Meanwhile, a dog's there and runs up to you and starts mauling the fuck out of you. If anyone avoided that first time, kudos to you. Because that I found to be very cheap. And I hate cheap shit in games. I really do. Even some of my all-time favourite games have cheap shit. I just hate that shit. And dogs are a bitch to kill sometimes, aren't they? They're just fast and they're relentless at times. So there's one example of a very cheap tactic on Capcom's end when it came to designing that particular area. I really think that was a kind of overlooked area. But you do the fuse part, and then during this you're introduced to the pale heads. Now, when I saw these, I thought, hang on a second, these are the guys from Resident Evil 2, like the original Resident Evil 2, the naked zombies. And to me, they basically are. But they've got their own kind of mechanic. You have to really fuck up their heads. A Magnum's going to sort that out, no problem. But that's their unique characteristic. But I couldn't help but think, why weren't these guys in Resident Evil 2 Remake? Because they had naked zombies in Resident Evil 2. There are other things in this game similar to this, which I will definitely address later on. You reunite with T, who then accompanies you down this long corridor, which is a little bit reminiscent to the Resident Evil film. And once you walk through this area, it's one of them areas where you just do nothing but walk through. You know, it's just to kind of push the story along without having, I imagine, spending extra time and money and resources carrying on from the cutscene. It's a guess. But anyway, the point is, Nemesis is right behind them somehow. Just shows up, and out of the one he's meant to kill, and the other person, he goes for the other person. He kills T. Because one, they have to get rid of T. Okay. And two, because it's meant to convey an action set piece. It's meant to instigate some emotion in you, right? That's why it's there, and it's meant to move the story along. So again, going back, why didn't Nemesis just go after, like, take her? Do you know what I mean? Plot armor galore in this. You evade Nemesis again, and then you're in the laboratory, the Nest 2. So there's another nest now. This section is quite short, but it's the end of the game now. It's a decent enough section, you know. There's a puzzle or so in this particular area, and you just grab the samples, you mix them about, and then you get out of there. Basically, there's some set pieces there which are very, very tense in places, and then you're reintroduced again to Nemesis, of course. There's a sequence where you're being dragged and all you have to do is hold up. That's not fun, Capcom. That's a lazy attempt to, again, push the story along. And also, it's another example of a weak design for Nemesis. You get through that. You meet up with Carlos in this kind of acid dispensing area where you basically do the same boss fight with Nemesis again, where he's running around with a few tweaks and some zombies this time. Again, that is very lazy, rushed. These are things other people have said as well, and it's absolutely true. There's no originality in this particular boss fight. Once you've done that, then you meet up with Nikolai, have a bit of a very short back and forth, and then Nemesis crops up again. He is now his final form. And then you've got the boss fight, which is probably, to me, the second best boss fight in this game. It's simple, There's a callback to it. It's quite Resident Evil 2 in a way. But it is what it is. And you complete that and you confront Nikolai and you do an extra bit where you shoot Nikolai and complete the game. No sign of Barry anywhere. Nothing like that. They don't want to go too far with this particular version of Resident Evil 3. And you complete the game. And that's it. Now, on my first playthrough, this took me around about 8 hours, I think, something like that. This is a short Resident Evil game. That's not necessarily a bad thing. To me, Resident Evil has always been about replayability. Play it again. It definitely helps when you have multiple endings, different scenarios, different characters to play, and extra modes to play near the end. The original game, to me, feels longer. I'm not sure what the facts are on these two when you compare them in terms of length. But because of the set pieces, because of the adventure where it takes you in the original game, it feels more chunky, beefed out, and it gives you more incentive to play. Let's not forget, certainly not forget, as well as the multiple endings, the choice mechanic in the game. And also the fact that on different playthroughs, ammo changes wherever you go. Now they've addressed that to a certain extent with different kind of difficulties, where you get the Magnum pretty much straight away. That's fine, whatever. The problem with this game, just like Resident Evil 2 Remake, when you're looking at criticisms, is that if it ain't broke, exactly, don't fucking fix it. A lot of people were pissed off that the clock tower wasn't there. A lot of people were pissed off that a lot of things weren't there. And instead, a new kind of fresh take on it was implemented. If you're going to do a fresh take, that's fine. What I believe you should do is keep the core fundamentals that made what the original was, how it was so successful in the first place. You got to keep that back. Because that's what a lot of your fans wanted. The newer fans who haven't played this before, they don't know any better, or they didn't know any better because they hadn't played it before. Maybe they hadn't seen it before on YouTube videos and stuff like that. So it doesn't matter in regards to those people who never played Resident Evil 3 before. It matters to us. And there was nothing wrong with it. The reason they did it, to me, after looking at several sources, lots of articles, so on and so forth, and having my own opinion in mind, is because they're on a time schedule to get the next set of games out. No one was... Okay, lots of people were asking for a Resident Evil 3 remake, but more were asking, from my experience, for a Resident Evil 2 remake. To follow up from the original, well, from the Resident Evil remake on GameCube, when it came out on GameCube first of all. So when you take out stuff that made what the original was great, you're not helping anything. You're not helping anything. If you want to go your own direction, that's fine. But make it justified by putting in the content, is what I'm saying, right? Don't accept less when it comes to future titles as well. Ask for more and stand by that. Talk with your wallets. And this should go without saying as well. When you're making a game that's based off of an original game that you made, or that your company made, like Resident Evil 2 Remake, Resident Evil 3 Remake, and Resident Evil Remake, there's no other choice, ethically, to judge this new version to the old one. You have to do it. It's harder for a remake like this to be judged on its own merits when it wouldn't be where it was without the original. That's like a form of justice right there. That's ethics right there. If you judge this on its own merits, as if this was its own game, then it's a better scoring game than what I'm going to give it later on. The other thing that I mentioned previously, which I'm going to get to right now, Previously I mentioned about the Pellheads and how they weren't in the Resident Evil 2 remake. The naked zombies, they were in the original. There is something even worse for me that happened in this game, and that was when I went into a save room for the first time in Resident Evil 3 Remake. They had a really nice remixed version of the original save music. And then when you play the segment with Carlos in the RPD, they bring out, and I couldn't believe it, and this is a bad thing. And I don't want to hear any bullshit about our people are not satisfied. Just listen to this, alright? It's all about common sense and making the best of your product for everyone, including your old school fans like me, who still like the newer games. The majority of them, anyway. You go into the RPD and you've got a version of the Resident Evil 2 save music there. Now, the Resident Evil 2 save music is iconic. The Resident Evil 2 game has pretty much, for me, some of the best music in the series. It's up there with Resident Evil Remake. When I went into that save room with Carlos and I heard the music play, I'll be honest, as pathetic as it might sound, I was quite insulted, because this should have been in Resident Evil 2 Remake. Another thing with this game is, because of the lack of content, because of the lack of initiative, what are we going to get with the next game or two? A lot of people are worried, and I said I wouldn't really mention these, but I'm not going into it too much. But a lot of people are worried about what's going to happen to Resident Evil 4, and a part of me enjoys that. I'm sorry, but after so many idiots talking shit about how I'm being nostalgic, or how I'm letting my nostalgia apparently, affect scoring of Resident Evil 2, or how I look at Resident Evil 2 Remake, I'm quite happy now to see it on them. A lot of us were waiting for this, and from what I was seeing on comments, when I was looking at comments, I'm restricting that a lot now, and I'm standing by that from that previous video I did on the channel. But I'm seeing these people saying it doesn't need to be remade, it still holds up today. Well, I'm sorry guys, but now it's your turn. And part of me, I'll be honest, wants them to fuck Resident Evil 4 up. Because then, the unempathetic people will see and feel what we were feeling when Resident Evil 2 was announced and they were changing certain stuff, and especially with Resident Evil 3. You might call it petty, you might call it mean, or venomous, or vicious, whatever. It is what it is. I do know who I am. I'm a very, very nice person. I'm a very empathetic person. And I'm a very intelligent person. And sometimes I can come across as arrogance. This is something else that's a bit of a running theme. But again, when you've got the experience, if Resident Evil 4 is indeed a thing coming out, the remake, part of me does want to sit back with a box of popcorn or something and just marvel at these people who think what I felt was nostalgic and unwarranted happened to them now. But really, in terms of Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 8, going back to what I was saying before, how is this gonna... Do we have a faulty version of Resident Evil 3 to make way for a better remake in 4, or a vastly improved version in 8? I've heard that 8 is going to be quite a big game. But then again, Capcom said that Nemesis would be untethered. So it's hard to know what to believe. I'm just saying that Resident Evil 3 is a step down from what Resident Evil 2 Remake was. It's unfortunate. The length doesn't bother me as much as other people. That's fine. I go through Resident Evil multiple times, whether there's more difficulties or not, more game modes than not, whatever. I like going through the game more than once, multiple times in the first few weeks or so. just so I can kind of get a feel for it and do well on it and do some speed runs maybe. Something, anything like that. But this game is too linear. I don't mind linear games to an extent, but this is too linear. This is too scripted. Half the time it feels like you're watching a film or just moving the film along, you know. Nemesis is a disappointment. His input in the game is lacking, especially when you compare all of these criticisms and points to the original game. The original game is still better than this version to me, as is the original version of Resident Evil 2 to this one. Okay, graphics are great. Graphics are great. But the gameplay doesn't compare to me. Resident Evil 3 gets a 6 out of 10 from me. Let's not forget Resident Evil Resistance. I don't really want to talk about this too much because, again, it's a step down. I really don't see myself spending any time on this at all. I've spent a good 2 hours, maybe 3 at a push, at a severe push. I spent about a couple of hours on Resident Evil Resistance, and I've played better titles. I'm not going to spend time on it just because it's Resident Evil. I will spend time on it if it's a great experience. It's not a great experience to me. It's a very, very mediocre experience. And I, quite frankly, don't want to give it any more attention than it deserves. Again, I feel like if you accept less, and this is less to me, then Capcom, developers, everyone will see this at some point. It's already happening, and be like, okay, if they're willing to accept that, then maybe we can, you know, kind of be a bit, you know, cut a few corners here and there. You shouldn't do that, in my eyes. You shouldn't do that. You've got to push. You've got to evolve. You can't de-evolve. It's a disappointing game. It's not a terrible game. If this was in a tier list, S, A, B, C, D, E, F, this would probably be a D. This would probably be a D. And if I remember correctly on my tier list, that puts it next to Resident Evil 6. And if you know me, that's not a good thing. You know, I'll be honest, I would ask you guys to put your thoughts in the comments. I mean, you please do so if you want to. But I'm not really going to ask you to do so because I've seen the comments before. I mean, if you agree with me or disagree with me, that's obviously up to you. I'm just going to leave it there. This iteration of Resident Evil 3 is disappointing. And yeah, I do hope they do something great with Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 8. I've been hearing lots of crazy shit. Of course, as soon as the news comes out, believe me guys, I'm there pretty much the second the information is out there. I just don't talk about it too much because there's a lot of other people giving their opinions out there, and there's other shit I gotta do basically. But when it gets on top of me, then I will absolutely put it out there like I'm doing with this review. But if you do want to comment, just make sure you keep an open mind. Thank you very much for watching the video, guys. I'm going to switch off this camera now and think of a few dozen things I could have said, but I think I've gotten the most important things out there. It's been a long review, and I appreciate it if you've watched it from start to finish. Even if you skip through it, I hope it's been of some entertainment to you. Thank you very much once again for watching, guys. My name is Grady, and I will see you on the next video.